Welcome to today's webinar. You're not as safe as you think you are. During today's presentation, attendees will be in listen-only mode. To ensure that you can see all the content for this event, please maximize your event window. To also maximize your slide view, click on the Scale button located in the upper right area of the window above the slides so that it shows at 100%. If during the program you would like to submit a question, please use the chat pod located in the lower left corner of your screen. Type your question into the text box at the bottom and click Send. If you have technical difficulties, you may contact the help desk at 877-297-2901. And now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Lisa Robinson. Lisa is a Senior Program Manager at the National Safety Council, where she works on addressing preventable motor vehicle crashes through effective behavior and policy change strategies. She serves as a subject matter expert and spokesperson for transportation safety, building strong relationships with the employer and transportation communities, including state governmental agencies. And now, I'll turn our program over to Lisa. Lisa, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you guys for joining us today. I am pleased that you could join us for Distracted Driving Awareness Month because we're focusing a lens on a growing social issue, the continual need to be connected to our phones, which has turned into a public health issue. Deaths on our roadways from distracted drivers. According to NHTSA, over 3,100 people died from distracted driving in 2017 alone. That's not even our injuries that occurred. These deaths are still grossly underreported, and they are 100% preventable. Distracted driving is a leading contributor to these preventable deaths. So this impacts the workplace. Motor vehicle crashes are the #1 cause of occupational fatalities. Distracted driving plays a large role in these crashes, and because a large portion of the population is employed. And distracted driving is impacting the workplace and employers. So I'm excited to be able to speak about or introduce you to a few other speakers that will be joining me today. But first I want to also share that the National Safety Council did a survey, and that 45% feel they feel pressure while they're driving. Again, 45% feel pressure from employers to check their email while driving. And 44% said they've crashed in the last 3 years while they were either commuting or traveling for work. These numbers are concerning. They should be concerning for all of us. I want to introduce a few more speakers that are going to be joining me today as we talk about such an important topic. Barry Barrington, he is the safety coordinator for the City of Waco. Mike Pitcher, he's the former CEO of Lease Plan USA, and Scott Scheffler, he's the Executive Director for the Permian Road Safety Coalition. Barry Barrington, he's a safety coordinator for the City of Waco. He has over 33 years of combined experience in the fields of risk management, environmental, and health and safety. Barry authored and co-trained the safety certification program that was implemented at the City of Waco in 2012. His one-hour presentation, Winning with a Successful Safety Culture, and other safety behavior culture-related presentations have been delivered at numerous state conferences and symposiums throughout Texas. New professionals to the more seasoned have found Barry's presentations and methods shared to have a fresh and positive impact for organizations and municipalities in so many ways. We're glad to have Scott joining us as well. He is the Executive Director of the Permian Road Safety Coalition, which is a not-for-profit organization focused on safety education and making the roadways of the Permian Basin in West Texas safer. Scott previously served as a volunteer on the Permian Road Safety Coalition Steering Committee, and he was the Steering Committee Chairman and was the founder of the original Permian Road Safety Coalition, an ad hoc oil and gas industry organization in 2015. Now a full-time industry effort and limited liability corporation, the Permian Road Safety Coalition's Board of Directors recently named Scott to be the organization's first executive director. Scott is currently employed by Shell Exploration and Production Company. His role at Shell is currently second to the Permian Road Safety Coalition Executive Director position. Scott has more than 22 years of public relations and corporate communications experience, primarily in the oil and gas and chemical industries. Prior to his role at Permian Road Safety Coalition, he was External Relations Manager for Shell's U.S. unconventional business. Next, but not least, is Mike Pitcher. He has 4 decades of experience in sales, general management, and executive leadership, both in small business and global enterprises. Mike is the former CEO of LeasePlan USA, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. LeasePlan is the largest fleet management in the world, with locations in 32 countries and with more than 1.8 million vehicles under fleet management. Prior to LeasePlan, Mike held senior positions with Pitney Bowes and Dell, including international assignments in Australia and Hong Kong. Under Mike's leadership, LeasePlan doubled top-line revenue and tripled net income. LeasePlan was named the best mid-sized company to work for in Atlanta twice and was named by Fortune magazine as one of the top 25 mid-sized companies to work for in the United States. They each are passionate about safety in the workplace and will provide insight on how they have successfully and continue to address distracted driving in the workplace. So thank you all for joining me this morning. I want to talk about a turning point, and I'd like to ask each one of our panelists this morning to spend a couple minutes and talk about what's the turning point for you and your company to take action when it came to distracted driving. And Barry, if you could start for us.
Sure. Barry Barrington, glad to be here and a part of this today. The turning point for us here in Waco was the prominent and the cell phone use among our citizens, and everyone has just grown to an effect that we had to deal with. And getting the message out what distracted driving really is, and it's more than just cell phones. It's passengers, it's pets in the cars, it's being fatigued, and it's eating. There's so many different various ways that we're distracted when we're driving. Those all came into play for us, and we knew that we had to be more focused and alert with not just employees but citizens and tourists and folks that are visiting our city. With the increased foot traffic that we have and people that are walking and talking on their cell phones, that became quite an issue as well. So it took a partnership with several different groups to make things better, but that was our turning point. We knew we had to do something here in the city.
Very good, Barry. How about you, Mike? What was the turning point when you decided that distracted driving had to be something that you addressed at LeasePlan?
Well, I get invited to some of these because LeasePlan was the first company to do a total cell phone ban. Not just texting, but just eliminating cell phone use in our company vehicles or if you had a company phone. 2009 and 2010 saw upticks for us in both the number of crashes and some of the severity, so the expense. Our risk officer as well as CFO started to note in the public domain lawsuits that were starting to hit in the millions. So from a risk factor of something happening that related to distracted driving, that was also there. So we put a team together that did about 6 months worth of research and got information and started to look at the impacts of texting and driving and what was out in the marketplace and started to really see a problem. We talked to sales, we talked to finance, we talked to different groups, and as you would suspect, the arguments by sales and by people that use phones and vehicles were productivity and, I need this time and this is where we close deals. And we kicked the can down the road for about 6 to 9 months before making a decision, before my VP of Safety and Risk walked in one day and said, hey, Pitch, it's my nickname, by the way, Mike Pitcher. He said, hey, Pitch, if one of your family members or one of our team members were killed, how long would it take you to make the decision to do the right thing? And within a week, we then moved. One of the things I've learned in a corporate environment, that is one of the things that make senior leaders move, is when there is a death or a serious injury. And that was like dumb to me. But it was a light that went off. I understand it. But it's more important to take a stand. While it might not be popular, texting and distracted driving is something that's preventable. So that was the turning point for us when we made a decision to ban cell phone use in company vehicles or if you had the use of a company cell phone.
You made some really great points, Mike, when you talked about, liability, concerns with risk. You made several good points. How about Scott? How about Shell Oil? What can you share with us about some of the turning points and even down in the Permian whenever you guys were addressing distracted driving?
Absolutely. Happy to, Lisa. So globally, Shell started to see a trend, much like our other colleagues, where we saw an increase in road safety incidents and, sadly, crash fatalities. So Shell, as a global company, really said we needed to do something different. So we actually started something called our life-saving rules. And one of those life-saving rules is no distracted driving and following the speed limit. And of course, no alcohol and drug use, wear your seatbelt. But focusing in on distracted driving for a second, having that background and having that experience, when we entered West Texas, which was an area built for agricultural use and now has incredibly heavy traffic for support of the oil industry, we started to see an increase in incidents. And sadly, again, or fortunately, we had no fatalities related to that, but we did have about 20 vehicle accidents over a rolling year, and made us take pause again. And so we went back and reviewed with our folks, that we needed to make sure we are doing something different, that we are telling a story about our life-saving rules and how it's made a difference for us globally and how we think it also can make a difference here in West Texas. And really, by doing that, we saw a significant improvement in our own, just reminding our folks and our contractors, we saw a significant improvement in the number of incidents that were occurring. And then I just want to tack on one other comment. What we're starting to hear folks here in the Permian Basin that have had incidents with their fleet vehicles, that they're starting to see double-digit, and I should say double-digit in the millions, so 10 million plus jury awards because of distracted driving. Folks have had enough of it.
What a great point. You guys all three hammered home so many important points, and I think so many employers are all focused on what's their turning point, when does that become. But there was something else that some of you have already kind of alluded to, was the team members. And I heard several of you mention about how you pulled other people in and had conversations and discussions, and you guys had plans. So I'd like each one of our panelists, beginning again with Barry, to talk about the team members, how you selected team members, how did you create an environment of safe driving through utilization of your team members. Barry?
Well, for us, of course, everything starts, it seems like, with policy. And so, of course, our human resources group helps develop the policies with a lot of review. But it also started for us with the National Safety Council's Our Driving Concern program, the Train the Trainer course, where we pulled you guys together and we came and we trained about 23, 25 folks who those became our safe driving contacts. And through them, we push out the emails and the communications that are shared to get the message out throughout the city, and even the public places like airports and our convention center and different municipal buildings. That group is also another group that's responsible, that helps us as a team member, is our department safety officers. There's just one safety coordinator for a little over 1,500 folks here in the city, so we utilize them within each department to also be a contact, not just for safety items on the job, but also for the driver's safety part as well, putting up toilet tabloids, whatever we push out as far as communicating safe driving. Then we have also two National Safety Council certified instructors who have just recently transitioned to the 10th edition training materials, which we're getting on board with that and finding it very successful. But we hold monthly meetings, 6-hour sessions for defensive driving. So that kind of wraps it up as the groups that are key for us and helping us implement all of our driver safety procedures.
Thank you, Barry. Mike, what type of people did you pull together when you first started having your conversation about addressing distracted driving?
Well, we had a team. We had we were in the fleet business. We managed fleets of, we managed a fleet at the time of, I guess, 250 to 275,000 vehicles. But we had our own fleet. So we had a VP of safety that was very important, a VP of risk that came in. I'd like to actually call out and give kudos to Scott and Shell. Shell was one of the companies that took this stance long before 2010 when they implemented their no cell phone use policy. And we contacted 2 or 3 different individuals from Shell that were very helpful to us to talk about what it took to be successful. And along those lines, when we start talking about who we recruited, it was critical that senior leadership bought in to the process. And as someone mentioned earlier on the call, someone can with a wink or the shrug of a shoulder kind of kill this, that, hey, they don't really mean us. This is just, flavor of the month, or this is safety speak. This is about being very serious. And we brought in executive management to have those conversations, as well as informal leaders. So lease plan kind of recognized who some of the informal leaders were in the organization. They didn't need to have VP titles. They didn't need to have C-level titles. But we brought them in to have discussions about how important this issue was, and that we were asking for their buy-in as well with regard to the safety of our team and our employees. We also threw out a contract to our employees that didn't have company cell phones or company vehicles, and asked them to sign contracts with regard to their commitment to eliminate cell phone use in the vehicle. So there was a wide array of people, departments, programs. We even had people bring in simulators in the cafeteria in our little area to play with them and text and drive and see who wrecked and how bad it was. But it was a team effort, and a lot of people participated in our safety launch.
Well, you had a lot of people involved, Mike. I think that's wonderful. Scott, it's nice that Mike had a good shout out for Shell. What can you tell us at Shell, or even in the Permian, that you're attacking distracted driving and the team members that you're pulling together?
Sure. Thanks, Mike, for the kudos. Shell is a very safety-minded company. One of the things we found was our top non-technical risk was actually driving down the road. So we decided we need to do something different. The current model wasn't good enough, just having a safety team, for example. So we actually formed something called our Road Safety Authority. And so we have folks that are dedicated to each one of our businesses, especially in the U.S., and in fact, here in West Texas, they're actually embedded with the local operations. They sit with the safety team, but they are 100% focused on everything to do with road safety. So these individuals will perform safety meetings, vehicle inspections. They'll work with our transportation contractors to help them manage their safety programs and learn from incidents and share that across not only our fleet but our contractors' fleets as well. We also employ the in-vehicle monitoring system to watch for speeding and hard braking and other driver behaviors. And these individuals in the Road Safety Authority will actually manage that process for us as well. We really think that having someone dedicated to this space and being the constant drumbeat, whether it's distracted driving or just safe driving behaviors in general, is a key to our safety performance.
Well said, Mike, or well said, Scott. I appreciate that. So that kind of leads me to my next slide, which is occupational driving programs. So besides policies, what does your company do to create an environment of safe driving or a driver safety program? What exactly, beyond now we've talked about the teams, we've talked about why and the turning point, what's going on with your occupational driving safety programs? Barry, we'll start off with you.
Well, as I mentioned, we started with our driving concern program that helped us get going with the focus, and we knew that there was a need for having that. But with what we've done is we partnered with other divisions within the city, like our street departments, our public works, traffic control divisions, who can help us do other things beyond just something that's in writing. We can get out and we can work with the intersections. We can do improvements there. We can put in more pedestrian controls, which we did over this past year that greatly helped us with our foot traffic. Increased signage, just simple no parking signs that would block the view to help someone make a safe turn. And we even got a portable signal light that it enables us to plug in when a pole gets knocked down. So partnering with these other divisions was an important point for us to help us with that. And you got policy, but without enforcement or holding folks accountable to policy is a big thing. So to create that environment of safe driving, we're looking at holding people accountable for unsafe behaviors that are recognized and that we see, as far as seat belts. We even encourage our own PD department. We're all on the same team, but we encourage them. If you see our own folks without their seat belts on, it's a citation. It's not just a state law, it's a policy, so it goes beyond, to make sure that we're touching all these different areas.
So can I ask you a question about your driver programs, Barry? Is this something that, you're focused on really all of your employees all year round? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Year round, yes.
Excellent. Great. Mike, what can you share with us about your Safe Driver programs?
Well, there's a couple things, and if I can, I'll speak a little bit from the industry perspective, since we did have managed multiple fleets for a lot of large companies. This is really kind of the carrot and the stick approach of, in a program, there is obviously the stick, which is if you break it, you're written up with regard to breaking the policy. If something is occurring where, you had an accident and you were on your phone or distracted, there's a possible for termination, depending on, up to and including termination. So that's the stick component of adherence to policy. The other thing that I've seen used in the industry as well as lease plan is the carrot, and that is safe driving for X number of period of time. Could it be 2 years or 3 years? The possibility in the fleet industry of giving an upgraded vehicle. So, if you were qualified for one level of vehicle, if you were safe for 3 years, you'd get the carrot and you'd get the upgraded vehicle. A free gas card for your home vehicle or your spouse. There are certain things, safety T-shirt or logoed shirt that the company could give. So I think the constant communication on the policy and the program, along with a carrot and stick approach to it, that there's something good and you become a role model. It's even calling people out. We did quarterly town halls. At quarterly town halls, you could recognize going X period of time without an accident. Those are kind of things that I think make a difference, that are not very expensive, but people like the recognition and also the side of what you can do with individual employees through management and leadership.
Several really good points. Scott, what can you share with us about occupational driving safety programs and how that's been beneficial as well as policies?
Absolutely. So on the policy side first, I will tell you that we have a very clear policy in Shell that if you choose not to follow the life-saving rules, you frankly choose not to work for Shell. Every employee can recite that, knows that, and has seen evidence of that. Just being strict and consistent on those policies has elevated our safety for sure. The other thing I would say is, we make sure that, our folks are going through the Smith System driving training, having additional safety meetings on a regular drumbeat through our road safety authorities, as I mentioned before. But we also make sure that our presentations are engaging. That's not just a talking head at the front of the room, that these folks leave that training or that session moved by an experience of listening to someone that's been a victim of an incident related to distracted driving or poor behaviors or behind the wheel, that folks actually see the results of what can happen. It's more than just a PowerPoint. It's really a movement of someone's feelings that we think is making the difference when folks get behind our wheels or even their own personal cars.
Very good point, Scott. I am seeing your questions, and at the very end, I will go back through and we'll go through all the questions and we'll get those answered with our panelists today. So I want to talk about gaining support because, I heard several things be said earlier about how, getting everybody involved, and we talked about, the carrot and the stick. We talked about, positive reinforcement. We talked about all these things, but we've got to have support. And one thing that I mentioned earlier in the beginning was, the 44 and the 45% of people saying that they feel pressured to check their email from their employer while they're driving. So how do we handle objections, and how do we handle the I have to be connected? So how do you gain support from the employees as well as managers? And we'll start with Mike on this one. Mike and Scott are going to answer this, so Mike, we'll start with you.
Sure. We got a lot of pushback. Again, I made the comment from sales, and it's like this is what we do. With regard to leadership and kind of common sense approach, I'd like to just kind of piggyback on Scott's thing of it's an emotional issue, and you talk about it. There is no call, no customer, no email, no text, none of that is worth someone's life or your life. And when you start talking about it, for me, I was part of the team that did a non-texting law in Georgia. I met with the families of 4 nurses that were killed in an event in Florida when a texting 18-wheeler didn't even stop. and killed 4 young women in the prime of their life. And when you start to be able to have examples and conversations about real people, it starts to eliminate the thing of, hey, productivity, missed calls, emails, text, whatever. There's 2 kinds of people. You've probably taken some of these personality tests. You're a thinker, you're a feeler. One of them believes in facts and figures. The other is emotional and more gut. Whatever kind of person that is, when we're presenting the information, we present it in a way that people can understand that nothing the company sends or nothing that someone will tell you on a phone call is worth someone's life, including your own. I think there's parts of this where people talked about productivity, but the interesting component we learned is our voicemail always read, hey, listen, I'm driving or away from my desk. I'll call you when it's safe. We got comments back from our customers that respected that approach. It wasn't about the need to immediately respond, but we got letters and messages from clients that said, it's so important to you that obviously your people are concentrating on driving and not my call, and I understand that. So we just kind of said this productivity, missing work, email thing, it's sort of like, just total BS, because there's nothing you can get or do while you're on that phone that is more important than either your or someone else's life.
Boy, you said some really powerful things, Mike. I appreciate everything that you said. Scott, how do you follow that up with gaining support from, your workforce and your managers? Because, Shell's a pretty large corporation, so how are we getting it top down and getting everyone to buy in?
Absolutely. And so one of the challenges we as a leadership team out in West Texas looked at is, we're emailing assignments and changes to assignments. We're asking the field staff to email in their orders for parts and for different labor needs. There's iPads and texting and phones and what have you. And it was a real dilemma for us. And so what we said is, look, we don't think this issue is as black and white as yes or no. Yes, it's true we have a no cell phone policy, but we also know that we have these workflow needs. So what we did is we just designed our work a little bit differently. We planned into a little bit of a journey management plan each day for our folks to be able to safely pull over, at a gas station or, off the road safely someplace that they can actually check those messages and actually do the data dump if they need to request services or parts or what have you. But it was just as simple as redoing the workflow and planning in that extra time to meet the needs that both the company and the employee need to be successful in the field.
Do you think that they were more supportive because you used journey management to allow them the time for the things that they were needing, so that the pushback was gone because of that?
No doubt about it. It was a compromise, but the best part about it wasn't us being kind of deaf to the problem, right? So we tell them no cell phones, and then we were pushing out information via cell phones and iPads and what have you. So it was really about recognizing that we do have the dilemma. Here's the solution we have in place, and then being open to ideas of how we can actually make that safer in the future as well.
That's wonderful. So let's talk about shifting driver behavior. So what's been some of the biggest challenges to changing driver behavior? And Barry, we're going to start with you. So how did you shift? Because behavior, we've been driving a long time. Doesn't mean just because we've been driving 20 years, we've got great driving skills. We might have 20 years of bad habits, right? So how do we shift driver behavior? What were some of the challenges, Barry?
It's just like when the seatbelt laws came about, and heck, we used to have vehicles that didn't have seatbelts in them. And, getting folks to use that, but I think explaining and driving the importance and the value of protecting a life and the value of what it's going to do. You cannot put a price tag on avoiding a serious incident or taking someone's life. And, like we said before, it was said about the carrot and the stick. We have to have accountability, of course, but cell phone use is kind of like MADD, M-A-D-D. It used to be, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Now cell phone use has become the epidemic. People just cannot put their cell phone down. And, we just have to stress the point of the importance of not being on that cell phone or being distracted, just like being impaired. So I think for us, it's just finding that, and we're still in search of different ways to express that value, that you do not need to answer your phone. You don't need to take that selfie or be on it. So that was a challenge for us as we got into this. It wasn't gaining for us management support because we've had that. It was just getting the people to get into that concept of the true value and importance.
So that sounds like a big challenge, and it sounds like it's still continuing that you guys are still addressing.
It's a daily thing, and it's not because of new employees, and they have to learn new concepts, and everything that goes along with that.
So, Mike, what can you share with us about some of the biggest challenges when we talk about changing driver behavior? Because, we know, again, distracted driving is preventable. So what's some of those challenges and overcoming some of those challenges?
So let me echo Barry's comment about it's a daily thing, because we have not cracked the code on this one either. And if anybody on the phone has, please feel free to email me, call me, or send me the message, because it is not an easy assignment. But, the reason that it is very difficult, we happen to be working in an environment that's unique to any other business environment in its past. And the reason being that we have 5 different distinct generations in the workplace, starting with traditionalist all the way to the I generation or Gen Z. Some of the folks on the phone might have heard a presentation that I do called How to Save a Life. And it's about fighting distracted driving. And everyone thinks that presentation, How to Save a Life, is about their own life, and it's not. I've found the most successful way to change driver behavior is to talk about the impacts of what you could do to someone else. And the 5 generations each view their position of taking care of others, if it's their family or their coworkers, as something that is important. Unfortunately, every time an individual texts and drives or uses a phone and drives, there's this little sliver of false confidence that says, hey, I've done it for a year, I've never gotten in an accident. Hey, I've done it for 3 years, I've never had a problem. Hey, I've done this for 10 years and I've never had a problem. The issue is that it only takes once, and it can massively change the driver's life as well as people in another car. And when it comes to distracted driving, 1 of 2 fatalities that happen are not the distracted driver. It's either the person in the vehicle or a pedestrian or someone on a bike or someone in another vehicle. What I've found has been the ability to change driver behavior is to talk, give examples, and think about the impacts that you have on someone else, not necessarily yourself, because you're a great driver and we all know you're a great driver. But what could happen in the event that there is the accident that occurs, that you kill someone else? By the way, there's 1,000 distracted accidents a day that people really don't talk about. We talk about the 3,000 deaths, but what about the 1,000 accidents that occur that changes people's lives every single day? So there's a human approach, I believe, that helps us change driver behavior. And I'll throw one other one. We made a sales VP put his phone in the back seat, because whenever it was within reach, he'd pick it up. And he made the commitment that he'd put it back there and not touch it. And it was a way to at least break the habit of, I got to pick it up because I'm the sales vice president.
That's a really great point. I'm going to mention this question, Mike, because this came up and it's exactly what you just said. So how do you handle a vice president of a company being the worst offender of distracted driving? So did that vice president make the decision himself to put the phone in the back seat, or did someone have some encouragement to help get him on board? Because when you're sending out all this information to all of the employees, and the VP is the first one to really kind of shrug it off or not take it seriously. So can you share more about that?
I'll just, this one is very specific, and he talked about his inability to do it. We talked about putting it away. We had the conversation as a direct report. Hey, listen, I'm addicted to this. This is the way it is. And my comment was in front of all the executive management team members, hey, I fully understand. If you can't find a way to fix it or put the phone in the back or put the phone in the trunk, you're going to have to be doing this at another company, because you are too important and too influential to our team to do a wink, to shrug a shoulder, to say it doesn't really apply to sales. And I think he believed that I was serious and would terminate, which I would have had to do. 20-year relationship with this gentleman, a fine sales vice president, an excellent business builder. but we couldn't afford to have someone at that level saying it doesn't really apply to us.
Good answer. I appreciate that. Scott, so what about Shell and changing driver behavior? What have you noticed? What are some of the challenges?
Yeah, let me talk to the challenges first and then maybe give a couple suggestions. So one of the things that we're hearing from our contractors is just the inconsistency in policy within the industry. So you might leave company A and where you're allowed to use your cell phone, and then now you're on company B site where only Bluetooth is allowed, and then you get to company C where there's absolutely no cell phone or any type of distracted driving allowed. That inconsistency frustrates the drivers, and in some cases they just don't care. They said, you know what, I'm going to take whatever action I want to do because, you know, these folks are all over the place and I don't even know which side I'm on, and just that inconsistency sends the wrong message. So whether it's an industry-wide or just between your individual job sites, have a consistent policy, stick to it, enforce it, no matter what level the employees, you know, comply, I think is really, really important. The other thing that we've seen, just to convince folks, especially the younger folks who have the kind of the attitude that it won't happen to me, is we really try to show them what it looks like from a victim standpoint where it did happen to them, whether that's a victim that was hit by someone driving distracted or maybe they were the ones that were distracted that caused the accident. Hearing that personal story and hearing the impacts on their life and the impact that will be with them for the rest of their life is really an eye-opener. And then the other thing that I think is that's really worked for us is really helping folks make the connection to home. So why do we go to work every day? We go to better our lives and to support our families and you know, and make their lives better and again support them. So why would we do something that's going to prevent us from doing that possibly in the future? So really making that connection of what would life be without me or this other worker at home had an incident occurred. And so we try to tell stories and show the impacts of those sorts of things to really kind of bust that whole "it won't happen to me" attitude.
Great points. You know, some of the things that we've been talking, I think, really rolls into management. We've already kind of mentioned a little bit about it, and I think one of the questions that we addressed was talking about it. So getting upper management to be supportive. So we talked about teams. But it sounds like, Mike, from what you mentioned, and I am going to bury and Scott into this, but Mike, it also sounds like, you know, you would have terminated this vice president if he was not willing to comply because you knew he was a key component in the rest of the employees following suit. So with that being said, it sounds like upper management is a very important component. So Barry, I know you said all along management wasn't an issue. Did you find any concerns, or did you go in and already sell it to them so they understood it?
You know, we had to sell it. We had to sell our program, but in Waco as a public entity, we were extremely fortunate to have the leadership, upper leadership that we have. It's not just for safe driving, but they also help us promote it and push it. And after 24 prior years in the private sector, you know, you really realize the importance of that upper management support. Without it, especially in the safety risk management field, it's a struggle. It's an uphill struggle if you do not have their support and buy-in. But here in Waco, you know, our city manager, his top 3 initiatives are safety, civility, and respect. And I know that's, you know, some people can say that, but I know for a fact that he lives it. They're traveling department to department, you know, pushing that initiative, you know, and selling, and you know, it's not really a sell, but they're out there promoting it. So for us, upper management support, you know, they've always supported our policies and the enforcement of it, and the enforcement of the behaviors, you know, that need to be addressed. So it hasn't really been a struggle for us. And I got to tell you, as long in this field to be able to say that, that's truly a blessing. But I know there are others that really struggle with it. Maybe some of the others, you know, the other guys may see it differently. But
well, and Scott, you know, Shell's a really large corporation, right? So you've got a lot, when we say management, there's a lot of people up in upper management. So how did you get everybody to understand at that top tier so that they're all in agreement?
Absolutely. So on day one, I would share that we have a contract with our staff and with our management that we will follow the life-saving rules absolutely from day one on, or like I said before, we choose not to work for the company. But we also write these rules in with our contractors, so they're in our contracts for contractors and subcontractors. The key thing is that we're setting clear policies. We're being very consistent in the handling of warnings and consequences. But then the personal involvement, we think, is really, really important because it sets a tone from the very beginning. In fact, our life-saving rules tell supervisors and managers that we will comply with the life-saving rules, we'll be a role model in following them, we will set clear expectations with our staff, and of course we will monitor for compliance. As an individual working for the company, we agree that we're going to comply with life-saving rules. We're going to intervene if we see an unsafe act, and if we're unsure how we should handle it, we still have a responsibility to go to a supervisor and make sure that is taken care of. And one last point on that is, we really think that when we have someone that we think is having a problem, they're a great solid employee, but we continue to see them showing up either in in-vehicle monitoring systems, or maybe we see an issue on the life-saving rules, that individual gets a phone call from a vice president. So it's kind of like getting called to the principal's office. It's not a pleasant experience, but it's also an opportunity to say that we're drawing the line. This is not acceptable behavior. We think you can do better. And again, it's setting the policy out forward in front and being very consistent as we follow through on the repercussions of not following these rules.
Excellent points from all three of you. Mike, one thing I'd like to ask you real quick before we move on and start talking about success. Mike, can you tell us, how did you begin making the initial contacts to begin building a team? I mean, you were the upper management, so what did you do with your initial contacts to be able to start bringing that team together so that everybody was playing for the same team? Can you share, because several people have actually asked about building the initial, what did we do with that initial contact?
Well, if you look at the facts and the figures when we did it, and now especially if you're doing it today, the numbers scream at you that this is a really big deal. It's an issue, and it's a tipping point, I believe, as millennials enter the workforce every day feeling the need to be connected. When we brought our team together, like I said, it started with the VP of Safety. And by the way, in 2009 and 2010, one of the main reasons the safety VP brought this up is because everybody in the organization knew the way to get Mike Pitcher to respond is to text him. He gets 250 emails a day and all these calls, but if you text him, he'll text you right back. I was at the top of that list of people that thought I was better than everybody else driving, and texting was easy and I could do it. There was some life-changing experiences for me that put this, but then when I looked at the numbers, it was obvious. It screamed this is a problem. It also took my daughter, who I kept telling, don't text, don't text, don't text, don't text. She responded to me, why, Dad? Why are you so emphatic? You do it. And then I realized I really needed to change my behavior. With regard to the team, VP of Risk, VP of Safety, my EMT gathered. We gave them the specifics, the numbers, the facts, and it screams at you that you have to do something if you are indeed considering that you're your brother's keeper. And the side of a company being responsible for its employees' safety is something that any CEO or C-level employee should take seriously. It may take some prodding, it may take a whole lot of effort, but the effort is worth it, because once senior leadership buys in, it's having that conversation that Scott just mentioned, the VP or the CEO, getting in your car, you pick up a phone and you go, put it down. There is no call, there is no business, there is no contract worth your or my life, including the fact that I happen to know your wife, and I never want to have to make that phone call that you're not coming home. Put the phone down.
Great job. Thank you for that, Mike. So tell me, all three of you, I'm going to ask Barry, we're going to start with you, and tell me about success. How did the City of Waco measure success? Was it on bent metal costs, the number of injuries, severity of injuries, number of incidents? How exactly are you measuring success?
We're looking at, of course, injuries. We hope there's no injuries that are associated with distracted driving, but the property damage results from that, whether it be backing and without use of a spotter or something like that nature, but the number of incidents, of course. We're also looking at, through our Public Works Division, the percentages of the improvements that we've done to certain intersections which have known to have a high severity rate, whether crashes or severe injuries. Some improvements that we made just this recently last year, we saw reductions in the 70 percentile reduction, which was a great thing, and then we've kind of been proud of that, of course. But in looking at intersections and traffic control, those are what we're looking at as far as how we're measuring it.
Those are great points. Mike, so after you were implementing everything, what were some of the key points that made you feel like you were being successful? What exactly was it? Was it the numbers, the dollars? What exactly was it that was helping you say we're on the right track and these are successful measures?
Yeah, the standard kind of number analysis is, what's the average cost of a crash, number of injuries, and severity of injuries. The other one is obviously just simply the number as a percentage of your fleet involved in a crash in a year. The other thing we used to kind of manage success was how many of our employees actually signed and agreed to the contracts that didn't have company cell phones and company cars. So that was our own employee and team members. How many folks signed the contract that they put the phone down and do that? So I think it's the standard measurement. And by the way, in the following 2 years since we implemented the program, every one of the measurements went down and improved. So we felt we were making an impact.
We hear that from a lot of employers that when they do make it such an important focus and it is a priority, they really do see a difference. So it's nice to hear that you're looking at that as well. Scott, what can you share about Shell's way that they're measuring success with their efforts?
Absolutely. So we as a management team every month actually track our miles driven. We look at our speed violations. We actually pull the driver's license records and make sure we're not missing anything. We really make road safety a key part of our management team meeting. And by doing that, it also made us think about how do we reduce the exposure? How do we make sure that we are not sending vehicles out unnecessarily and adding to that risk? So we've worked as a team with both field and management to look at reducing unnecessary trips and unnecessary work, or being able to combine those jobs so we're sending one crew out instead of multiple crews, looking at all sorts of ways to kind of reduce that risk. But the other thing we've done is really made safety part of the compensation. So we are going to reward you on your driver's safety. It's an absolute big rock, if you will, for our compensation packages. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, just by reducing the miles driven, we've seen a reduction in the incidents as well. So if you don't have a truck out there, you're less likely to be hit by someone that's distracted in their driving. So we think that that's really made a difference. We've seen significant cost savings, both in terms of equipment wear and tear, as well as, of course, accidents. And what we've been able to do is actually take those savings and actually purchase better trucks. So we are now, on purpose, we are actually buying Ford F-150s with crash avoidance instead of vehicles that didn't have that. So we're actually taking that savings and making the vehicles that we send our folks out in a lot safer.
Wow, sounds like several different key points there, Scott. Wonderful. So let's talk about beyond the workplace. I think I heard Scott, I believe I'm going to ask all three of you, but I know that I heard Scott mention something about contractors, and I think, Barry, you talk about the community a little bit. So we know that off the job costs an employer money. So can you tell me that any of your efforts, Barry, is really going, to the family or community? Are you seeing a difference? And I know, Scott, you're working in the Permian road safety area as well, in Texas. So can all three of you, Barry, I'm going to start with you, to share with us how maybe some of the efforts have actually paid off beyond the workplace?
Well, we certainly encourage our employees when they attend the defensive driving course to not just sit in the class and as a student and absorb the material and leave signing a sign-in sheet. We really encourage them to take this home to their families, to talk about the different concepts and rules that we deliver there in those courses. But for us, being in as a public entity, we have a lot of public buildings. City Hall, library, airport, convention center, municipal court building, the zoo, museums. we have these things, and we can put postings up in there, and we never know. You never know who you're going to touch. It may be someone such as our host, Lisa, that has actually seen some of our posting in the airport. And what's the first thing someone does when they get off the plane in the airport? They're going to the cafe or the restaurant or the restrooms, and to see a posting in there, you never know what that message may do and who they may take it home to, that teenager that's learning to drive or whatever. So I would say that our program is having an effect on folks outside our organization in a big way, just by the different postings they're seeing, whether in the restrooms or other places that we're putting them up.
Well, and I can also say that one of the days that we were at the City of Waco and providing some training, I know that one of the gentlemen said, I'm a Boy Scout leader, can I use some of these resources? Another person was a grandmother and said, can I use these with my grandchildren? So we did see that firsthand, and I think that's really wonderful that you do look at the community and beyond. Mike, so can you tell us, like when you had this initiative in your push, because you were definitely passionate, you wanted everybody to go home the same way they started their day. So did you also have an emphasis on the families?
Without a doubt we did, and Lease Plan actually supported and donated vehicles to a not-for-profit organization that does defensive driving for teenagers. We've had our managers and leaders speak and do the presentation, how to save a life in the community. I just think that this is something that affects all of us. And when you think about it, and not to be dramatic, but it's a fact, when the time we get off this call, after we've spent an hour, there's a good probability that 5 people have been killed on roads and highways in the United States today, in that hour. One of them is probably the result of a distracted driving incident, as we know that this happens 10 to 12 times a day. It's all preventable. That side of distracted driving is preventable, and it continues to be the emphasis and the message and the communication of how you get it to your team, to your employees, and then to their families. Because as we all know, you'll do things for your children that you might not do for yourself. And this part of that message is how you influence all the time. And we continue to drive that message at both town hall meetings and our communications when we talked about safety. And Scott is right. That safety approach starts at the top, but when it becomes cultural, it filters all the way through the organization, and that's when you're starting to have some success.
Really some good points. Scott, what can you share about, and I know a minute ago you did mention contractors, so when you look beyond that employee, what are you looking at and how are you hoping to make a difference?
Absolutely. So as we talked about the Permian Road Safety Coalition, we really believe that safety is not a competitive space, that really this is an important topic that we should share best practices, and that's exactly what we do in the Road Safety Coalition. Is whether you're a big organization like ours or you're just a small group of like-minded companies like we started out just a few years ago, it's about getting together and sharing what is working. And what's frustrating about this whole thing is, even as a company, if you get it 100% right, all it takes is driving down the road and running into someone who didn't follow these rules, who doesn't have this sort of standard in place, and is driving distracted and causes an incident. So that's what's really challenging about this space, is you can get it right and you still have these issues. So we're about sharing best practices not only with our contractors and having expectations of our contractors, but we go one step further and we're actually putting on programs and inviting the community in, whether that's at the high school level or just any driver really, and sharing what we think is going to make our community safer. And that's been our big message. Is it's easy to blame the big trucks or the industry vehicle driving down the road, but everyone behind the wheel has a responsibility, and all it takes is one individual with a cell phone that could ruin an entire life.
Excellent points. I think what I'd like to do is answer. We're almost at the end of our time, so I think I'd like to ask a few other questions that some of the attendees have given us. So I'm going to ask you guys a few of these things to be able to help share how your company achieves success. So what about policies for hands-free technology like Bluetooth? Would one of you like to answer that, Mike, or Scott or Barry? One of you can address that, and then we'll move on to another question. What about hands-free? technology and Bluetooth? What about policies?
From the lease plan standpoint, we did a total cell phone ban, so it wasn't about hands-free. But I am on a team that did Georgia hands-free law, and there are now 18 states that are now hands-free, Arizona as recently as yesterday. The number is incredibly compelling when you look at the state data that hands-free is having an impact on the number of deaths that are happening on highways. Is it the perfect solution? It is not, but it is safer than using a cell phone and holding it in your hand because of the manual issue, cognitive issue, and visual. At least you take away the manual distraction. So again, it's important, but we went completely cell phone ban.
And that's a great.
Sorry, I would just add that, no, it's okay. I just would add that, we too are 100% cell phone banned because we feel like you need 100% of your attention on the roadway. Even looking down to hit a button to answer the call is taking your eye off the road for 2 seconds, and we know what that can lead to.
Good point. I was just going to mention that, the NFC's policy is, hands-free is no safer because the part of your brain that you use to have that phone conversation is the exact part that you use to drive. So hands-free is no safer. I also want to ask a question about onboard vehicle recording devices to monitor no cell phone policy. Have you used those, Scott and Shell? Do you guys use those?
So we have the in-vehicle monitoring system, but not the camera. But we do have a contractor that is utilizing them. They really like it for 2 reasons. If there is an incident, you can go back and look at it. They try not to do the big brother approach, but if we start to see an issue, then that resource is available to them. So it's a slippery slope there with some of the privacy issues. But if you have a strict policy in place and you talk about how you're going to utilize it, we think it's a good tool. It's very expensive, though.
Okay, absolutely. Barry, do you guys have any in-vehicle monitoring that you guys use?
No, we don't have that in our vehicles. No, we have the cameras, but they don't monitor the interior of the cab of the car or vehicle.
And I've heard some employers are using it and they're finding great results as a result of using them. So what about technology? Because, we've got the infotainment centers. One of the questions is it adding a distraction? So I know, I believe, Scott, you made a comment about utilizing the funds that you're saving to buy better vehicles and trucks. So does that mean that there's more technology?
So yeah, the technology that we're really keen on is the anti-crash avoidance technology, the warning of blindsided, vehicles passing your blind side, that sort of thing. We are concerned, though, because it does come up with the navigation systems and what have you. So again, it's about educating your staff about what is your priority when you're behind the wheel. It's driving down the road. So some of that, it's a give and take because it's a package system, but we'd rather err on the extra crash avoidance stuff and then educate on the other items.
Well, it certainly sounded to me like you were also saying that technology could be concerning, but education is the way that you're addressing that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we also want to know, what about, somebody asked a really good question about blending corporate policy accountability when you have a crew of student drivers. Are they afforded more leniency? So what is your philosophy on if you've got this younger group of student drivers that are working? This is from a question from a university. What is your thought on that, Mike? Do you have a thought on that?
There's no exception to the policy. From someone that's been there as an intern with our company and you've been there for 48 hours, or you happen to have been there for 40 years. The policy is the policy, and again, I mentioned earlier the different generations in the workplace and what they feel is right and how they use technology. There is no exception.
Good answer. I like that as well. So we've got time for, I think, one more question before we wrap up, and it's about the carrot rewards. And I know that I think Mike and Barry might have been both that mentioned about like the carrot and the stick, and so they want to have a little bit more about carrots and rewarding. And I know, Mike, you mentioned quarterly rewards and bringing up some points. And can both of you maybe share for a second what you guys are doing for rewards and recognition?
For us, it was just simply a recognition over a period of time. It wasn't, we hold quarterly town hall meetings, and in those meetings, all employees would meet with senior leadership once a quarter to talk about the business, talk about issues, but also we had the opportunity to recognize safe driving. It would be for either 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years of safe driving, no accidents. It could be a gift card. It could be a shirt that recognized it, a small trinket, a pad, a notebook. It was something to say that these employees have gone this long without having a problem.
We don't have any specific thing like that we're offering, but we're really big on the recognition through either a spotlight on our intranet where we can spotlight individuals that have been seen doing something good, like we got a call just recently about a solid waste driver that was observed pulled over on the side of the road, and a taxpayer called in saying that they were upset about that because they was on the side of the road on their cell phone. Well, our response to that is, thank you. We'll be sure and tell them how much we appreciate them doing that, because that's what we expect of them to do. If they have to take a call, they have to leave, the route. They have to go to the side of the road and stop. So we would recognize a good act of behavior like that, and that goes a really, really long way. And at the end of the year, we also do something we call Job Well Done, where we recognize folks for different tasks that they've done, and safe driving is a part of that.
Well, thank you. I really want to thank Barry, Scott, and Mike for joining us today. They're so passionate about safety in the workplace and keeping employees safe on and off the job, as well as other people on their roadways. So I thank all three of you for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us today. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Diana.
Thank you, Lisa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this webinar. We appreciate your attention and participation in today's event. There is a short survey now displayed on your screen. Please take a moment to fill it out. We appreciate your feedback. Also, to download a copy of the presentation materials, click on the Handouts tab located in the Conference Materials pod on the left side of your screen. Once again, thank you for your attendance. You may now disconnect.